It is my pleasure to welcome you to our first episode of Retailer Podium. I'd like to welcome our CREC participants from coast to coast to coast, our new call participants joining us for the first time, and our very special keynote speaker, Jeff Boyd, who is the Senior Vice President of Real Estate at Dollarama. Today's episode of Retailer Podium is sponsored by Brunel Commercial Interiors, one of Western Canada's largest architectural millwork, metals, and retail fixtures manufacturer. Building commitment one client at a time since 1964. Visit brunel.ca, BRUNEL, for more details. Please note, while our calendar invite indicated a 1 hour time slot, we are going to do our best to keep this to about 20 minutes or so. There will be a live chat box, so if time permits, we will try to get to some questions at the end. And just another reminder, please mute your mics. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our CREC Retail Podium host, Michael Stronger, with Shindico Realty in Winnipeg. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you from the floodplain in central Canada. Jeff, thanks for coming.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I thought we'd break right into a few questions. And one, I think it's safe to say that Dollarama has been nothing short of an incredible success story. I don't think there's anyone who isn't familiar with the brand from coast to coast now, but maybe you could let our audience know some of the history of the company and what differentiates Dollarama from the competition.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. So obviously the company was started by Larry Rossi a number of years ago. Larry was a member of the Rossi family, which kind of ran a series of stores in mostly in the Eastern Canada, the Quebec area specifically. Larry was one of many siblings, and I think as part of that original family history, they would each of the kids would become the district managers. So they all had their own batches of stores that they operated. And one of the things that Larry had tested in a couple of the stores was these dollar sections, and he found them to be incredibly successful. That in some cases, the story goes that he found that the dollar sections in the stores were outselling the rest of the stores. So he saw that there was a real demand in there. So Larry kind of branched off and started his own thing, and tried it initially in some pretty small towns in Quebec, and named it Dollarama, and I guess the rest was history. Really seemed to take off and resonate with the consumer base. And Larry kind of always had this philosophy of keeping it simple, minimizing complexity, and really being true to what the company was. Know what your customers expect you to be, and then just be that. And so I think they really built a great business around those standards. And I think what really set them apart from the rest of the dollar stores was they tell this story that a lot of the dollar stores at the time used the same sourcing people. Larry was a guy who, while everyone else was going to the sourcing people and saying, "I want you to make me this same thing, but I want you to make it cheaper," Larry was saying, "I want you to make me this, but I want you to make it better." So that instead of that race to the bottom of quality, he was really trying to get that quality up so that the customer would see that they were really getting excellent value at Dollarama. So that, along with the science of really implementing strong merchandising standards, which in that segment was not something that was really focused on. It was a focus on product quality and merchandising standards, and that really elevated and set it apart. I think that, in addition to being very aggressive on real estate and knowing that was a key in getting a lot of great locations. When you couldn't get great locations, getting locations that were acceptable, but at least getting a foothold in the market. And again, feeling that the product offering would give the customer enough reason to come to your store, even if it wasn't an ideal location, an ideal configuration, and then really improving your real estate from there. I think that was a lot about what made that, built the company and made it what it was today.
So how many stores do you have as of today open in
So as of
Canada?
Today, it's hard to keep track because we add so many in a given year. But at the end of last week, we were just under 1,450. So we're about 1,448, and we'll be above 1,450 any day now.
So with plus or minus 1,450 stores, that's a lot. That's an incredible market penetration for Canada, given our population and sheer vastness of the landscape.
Yep.
So what's the growth strategy? What are you looking forward 5 years? What's the growth strategy to keep? How many stores per year you're projecting, and what are you doing to stay aggressive in that regard, with given that you already have so many locations?
Well, I guess if you look at it and say it does seem like a lot of stores, I'll give you that. I think we may have surpassed McDonald's at this point. If you actually look at it on per capita and then compare it to the States, the US actually has significantly higher per dollar store per capita than we do in Canada. So we believe there is still actually room for growth in Canada. But I think to your point, it's the vastness of our country, right? We have a lot less population centers than they do in the States. So there aren't that many places that we don't already have a business. However, there are still some. So when we look at that, we have been doing about 60 to 70 stores a year for the past 5 years. We have a plan to do a very similar number this year and next year. And so I think we really do see that there is still that opportunity for growth. And I think what that looks like, I mean, we have done a full network strategy, but what that really looks like is a lot of the same sort of thing that we do traditionally do, where those still exist to be done. And that would be, your kind of conventional everyday needs plaza, grocery anchored, maybe it's got a bank, it's got a drugstore, your everyday weekly needs. We really see ourselves as a general merchandiser that really fulfills that daily and weekly shopping trip in those traditional plazas. We have all sorts of other locations on downtown street fronts and these kind of things. But I think where a lot of our future growth will be is also in smaller markets than we've traditionally done in more remote markets where we may have not have stretched our supply chain as much in the past, and we see opportunities to do that. Northern communities, more rural communities. As well as even urban centers. We have not done a lot of really dense urban stores, and we think that there's a market there. Condo opportunities where we see that urban infill and those kind of developments happening, mixed use developments. We see a need for us to also explore more of those opportunities. And just as of late, we recently opened in Yellowknife and in Whitehorse, so we've got stores in both of those markets now where we didn't previously. We've done a couple stores in Fort McMurray. And then as an example of some smaller markets we're going to, we recently built a store in Didsbury, Alberta, which is a smaller town, 3,000-ish people. And so far I've been very happy with how that store's performed. And so, knowing that we've tested that opens up a lot of markets where we traditionally hadn't really explored before.
That's definitely interesting. We're certainly noticing a renewed interest in smaller markets here from retailers of all different types. You referenced supply chain. Obviously, that's in the news on a daily basis. Everyone's struggling with it. Just in time is now just in case. How is Dollarama with so many stores and so much growth dealing with supply chain issues?
Yeah, I mean, we have challenges like everyone else does. And obviously, when you're adding 60 to 70 stores a year, you're not making that problem any easier. However, ironically, I think one of the things that was one of our strengths, and that in some cases Dollarama had criticism from the analyst community on, was we had too many warehouses. We were sitting on too much inventory. And there's a reason why we did that. We were a problem solver for a lot of suppliers, right? Where a supplier might have a deal with an existing retailer, and then that retailer cuts the order in half, and they are holding these items. Dollarama was traditionally that first call who would take that inventory off their hands. And in order to be able to do that consistently, you need to have a warehouse to put it in. So while the world all of a sudden had this massive supply chain issue, and us as well, we have lots and lots of imports, but we also had the benefit of lots and lots of items and lots of warehouses. And so we didn't necessarily see that same problem that a lot of the other retailers did, and had a little bit of a smoother curve through this pandemic. So that's one thing. And then as far as the other supply chain issues go, again, we're pretty vertically integrated. We have lots of very, very strong relationships, offices in China. I think I would say there are merchants that would not necessarily be a traditional buyer They're much more of a product innovator. And so a lot of what they do is not wait to have somebody sell them a product, but instead say, this is a product we need. We're going to go out and source it. And with that, you have a lot of very strong established relationships in China. And so leveraging a lot of that helps us to keep that supply chain as smooth as possible, or at least take out the bumps where they can be taken out.
So roughly how much warehousing and distribution do you have square footage wise approximately? And can you just describe where it's located and how you distribute
Sure.
across the entire country? Because we know Target, at least one of the main reasons they failed so quickly was an inability to distribute.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
So again, very non-traditional. I'm not going to give you a square footage because I don't have it in the top of my head, and I don't want to get the number wrong. But we have several warehouses, several distribution centers, and unlike most retailers, all of ours are centrally located and all in and around the Montreal area. And we do get calls all the time about, hey, isn't it time you have one in Calgary? Don't you think you should have one in Winnipeg? What about Vancouver? Yeah. And they've done lots and lots and lots of studies on this. Experts have come in, and again, it comes back to that keep it simple. They have a very established model, very effective. And again, a lot of these warehouses also don't have a lot of the bells and whistles you see with automation and these typical things you see in modern warehouses. A lot of them are very basic, very straightforward. Comes in one side, goes to the other side, taken across with a hand trolley, and incredibly effective. People have studied these things from top to bottom, and every time they do, they say, we can't do it any better than you're already doing it. It's all located in around the Montreal area. And again, just the way that the supply chain model works, way that we take ownership of shipping containers from port to here and then back, and then get them back on a boat and back over to China. It's a system that we find works very, very well. And so for the present time, this is really our hub of warehousing and distribution here in Montreal. Now, could that change at some point? It may, but up till now, it's been effective.
I don't think anyone could have predicted that a company of your scale could have been successful with that model. Going back a decade or two, it's really something. So, speaking of issues that are impacting the retail world, I think we can all safely say that inflation is no longer transitory. It's top of mind for everybody every time they go to the gas station or the grocery store. How is Dollarama with the lower price point managing the inflationary pressures?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because when you look at even when you look at a use clause that we have in a lease, our use clauses are typically built around our price points, right? It kind of says, we're going to be a general merchandiser, we're a value discount merchandiser, and generally limit our prices up to a maximum of, let's say, $10. So most other retailers don't have a price ceiling, and wouldn't be in default of their use if they decided to increase their prices. Now, part of us is also realizing that who we are and what we have to promise to our customer is the best value retail option. So we don't want to get into a point where we're escalating those prices. But in an inflationary environment like this, it obviously puts a lot of pressure on. Now, we have recently announced that we are going to move our maximum price point up to $5. We have had items in our store up to $4 for years now. And again, that is not just about inflationary pressures, but it's really more about the ability to introduce new, innovative, and exciting products that you just couldn't sell for a $4 price point. It does allow, where absolutely necessary, to say, if I have a $4 item and I have to remove it from the shelves now because I just can't afford to sell it for $4, it gives us a flexibility to sell it for $4.25. And again, we're also the last retailer to move on something like that. We're going to always make sure that if we're going to increase a price on anything, it's because the rest of the market has already moved in that direction. It's absolutely essential that we're always the best value for the customer. Otherwise, we break the promise, and that's just not worth it at the end of the day. What they expect from us is the best value.
Well, I can say personally, I've always found part of the Dollarama experience is is just going up and down the aisles and just seeing what's the latest thing that is being sold and at a price that you just have to kind of scratch your head and go, how are they doing this? It's amazing. Generally, I would go there with something in mind and come out with 5 or 6 things that I didn't have in mind. You're at least going to go up 2 aisles, one to get to the back and one back to the front. And they're sometimes 200 feet deep. So that's a lot of SKUs. So it really is something unique.
Well, we're relying on that, Michael. So I'm glad you're following. I'm glad you're following the model. That's good.
That's right. Just I'll try to keep this tight to 20 minutes, and then if there's any questions from the audience in the chat, we can go there. So going forward, maybe you can let everybody know what type of locations are you looking for in general? What's the size, and do you have a prototype?
Sure, happy to talk to that. So sure, I'd say a typical size that we're looking for is about 10,000 square feet. We have lots of stores that are in the 8,000 range. We have lots in the 12,000 range. We have outliers that are significantly larger than that, which might just be a situation we've taken opportunistically on a gross basis. We have a few that are smaller than that. I think that's partly what I guess we would look for is don't assume that we won't look at it because it is outside of a given size range. If it is in a key location, it's a good network fit for us, it fills a need, we will look at interesting spaces. And I think I'd say that even when I've been here now for about 2 years, and I came from a world of large format prototype based businesses where everything had to be just so. I think it's fair to say that we have a prototype once you're inside the box. We have the same floor tiles, the same lighting, the same paint colors, the same fixtures. The aisles flow very similarly. However, we have all sorts of shapes and sizes and have found unique ways of using difficult real estate. We have triangle stores, we have L-shaped stores, we have stores on second floors, we have stores in basements. And a lot of that, again, has been find the best real estate that you can in order to get into a market and do the best you can with it. So it is very, very, I'd say we're very, very flexible with the spaces that we can use. Examples of that where we have very deep former, let's say, boxes like an old Zeller's box and this sort of thing that gets carved up. We've taken extremely deep spaces where we've actually taken an L-shaped warehouse off the back, which allows the landlord to carve out a front-facing unit on the front of that and put a very difficult box into productive use. And we're usually the retailer who can figure out how to do that. As far as the types of places we'll go, again, rural locations, urban locations, any of those suburban type traditional plazas, grocery anchored, or even adjacent to those kind of places that there's a natural draw of customers and it's the next best location that we can get to. So I think that kind of paints a little bit of a picture of the types of locations.
Yeah, I know when Dollarama first came to Manitoba, one of the exciting things from the developer's perspective was the fact that Dollarama could take space right adjacent to a grocery store and go the full depth. Whereas a typical strip beside a grocery store might orphan land at the back. It basically becomes some staff parking, but it's a waste of land from the developer or landlord perspective. And Dollarama being able to take that depth is very valuable from the landlord perspective.
What's interesting for us, and that's what I find, is when people ask us for our prototype, is what we've boiled our prototype down to is critical width. Right. And that if we have the right width of a space, we have a chart that kind of says all the different widths, that as long as it's in that critical width, any one of those or a little bit bigger, then we can use the space. So we'll do all sorts of things as long as we can meet that and make it efficient.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much for taking the time. It's everyone's busy. You've got 60 or 70 stores to open this year, so we'll let you off the hook. So I'm just going to thank everybody for coming to the CREC Retail Podium, and especially Jeff for being our guest speaker. Today's episode was sponsored by Brunel Commercial Interiors, which we mentioned before. They're one of Western Canada's largest architectural millwork, metals, and retail fixture manufacturer. Brunel.ca is the website, sorry. So everybody have a great week and month ahead. Stay well and stay safe, to quote Michael Kehoe. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.